Hi, my name is Sophie Poost. I am a white woman with short curly hair. I am wearing circular purple glasses, a black shirt that is sleeveless and high-collared with a ceramic chicken necklace. Behind me is a tan off-white wall. Off-center is a window with a white blind that's pulled all the way, and behind me are blue, blackish cushions to the couch that I'm sitting on. I am a disability advocate and activist, and I have supported many other people through the grievance process in their workplace, helping them lodge a complaint, ask for accommodations, work through the investigation process, write statements, and appeal if need be. And now I want to talk to you about the investigation process and how to effectively carry out the investigation process and not fail to do your due diligence in carrying out that process in order to have a successful work environment. And I think that's a good place to start. A lot of us, when we get involved in an organization or start an organization, hope that we can build an environment that is a very positive, supportive community where employees and board members and consumers and the outside community all feel understood and supported and understand the greater mission and think that it's being upheld in an effective manner. And sometimes that's just not the case. Whether it's out of spite or ill will from someone, whether it's intentional or unintentional, sometimes things happen, things are said that can be really hurtful, can cause harm to the community, to employees, to consumers or customers, and the response in some cases is a grievance that is lodged by an employee, again, a consumer, so forth, to the organization, and the organization has to act appropriately to respond to that. And I think it's really important to understand that while we don't want to have to come to that point, if we do not handle issues effectively from the get-go, they can often develop into a larger risk, can cause bigger issues, can become more of a toxic environment for everyone, and then the mission is really lost in that. I would like to start by showing a few definitions on the screen right now, starting with grievance. A grievance is a state of dissatisfaction, expressed or unexpressed, written or unwritten, justified or unjustified, having connection with an employment situation. And in turn, an investigation is the resulting reactionary process to the formal grievance being lodged. So now that we have the definitions, I want to look at a case study. If you're interested in learning the steps, if you're interested in knowing what an effective response is, or what components are part of a good investigation, if you have more logistic-based questions, I encourage you to read the resources associated with this video and the post as well. This, however, is going to be looking at a case study of a true failure, of a nightmare of sorts, so that we can kind of pick that apart and learn from failure and grow. And I think that that will help us understand the necessity of a grievance and investigation policy and process, so that we know even if it does feel awkward, it's really important to get it right. So the example I'd like to share with you is a situation, or a few situations, that took place over time at the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, which I promise you will sound ironic once you get to understand the details a little bit. I'm going to go through the quick and dirty. However, if you would like to learn all the details or learn more, I encourage you to look things up on social media at #CMHRStopLying. I'm going to show it on the screen right now. Again, it is #CMHRStopLying. So this is an example of a true dumpster fire of sexism and racism, homophobia, you name it, it's probably happened here. It's got all the ingredients to a true epic failure. So in June of 2020, around when things were escalating in the United States with the riots associated with George Floyd murder and the Breonna Taylor shooting. In Canada, at the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, people started coming out on social media. Old employees and current employees and volunteers and community members sharing accounts of racism that happened in the museum that were so integrated into the culture of the museum and its institution that people had left, had quit, and had really created a harmful and toxic environment for a lot of people. And when this came out, the museum responded with the impression that this was the first they had heard of it, that they would be listening and adjusting themselves based on the experiences and the concerns that they gather from the Black, Indigenous, people of color, which can be shortened to BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, staff, and volunteers. However, now that it's become public on social media, outrage had built, and so did attention to the matter. Public agencies were pulling support. The community was kind of turning against the museum, and so the museum then responded with, we're going to bring in an external person to review complaints and hire an external auditor, and once they're done doing their search and doing the research and gathering evidence, we'll take the results they give us and we'll build an action plan. However, at this time, LGBT individuals started coming forward saying that their materials were being censored by the museum, that sometimes it didn't make it to the museum floor, and sometimes they would be put out for viewers to see. Visitors could come and learn about LGBT rights and issues, except sometimes they would block the displays or close off the galleries to certain groups when they were visiting, usually religious groups. And this was common for about 2 years. The museum's response this time was a public apology, and the CEO agreeing to step down after his term was up, so he wouldn't seek reappointment in August of 2020. However, at this point, the ball is rolling, and so people are still not happy, and 5 current and former employees come forward saying they were all sexually harassed by the same coworker. The same male colleague had sexually harassed 5 different women in different times, and they were coming forward and saying not only did it happen, that they complained and were dismissed by HR, and that the male colleague was allowed to keep working even after and during an internal probe, and that because of this, many staff members felt traumatized because they had all had this similar experience with him. The staff went to management and were bullied, and when they went to HR, they were mocked. The HR manager said as much as, "Oh, not this again," clearly understanding that the issue was still existing with the same male individual. One employee admitted that multiple complaints had been made, investigations were launched, and even an external lawyer had been brought in to review the allegations twice. And nothing had happened with this male colleague. He was still there. At this point, the union steps in for the workers and asks for anti-harassment trainings to be placed in the contract during their negotiations. However, they were turned down, and a spokesperson for the museum said that the respectful workplace policy and training was in place for this reason, and they cited the external investigation that had happened twice. But staff said very clearly that even though they had these trainings and this policy, it was not being enforced, and it had not really been mandated well in practice. So at this point, a lot of people are upset. We've had issues of sexism, racism, homophobia, and all of this is blowing up. And at this point, the board says that they didn't know the depth of the complaints. And whether or not this is true, they are looking into creating a diversity and inclusion committee, and a company-wide investigation would be taking place. And now the CEO has immediately stepped down, and the board president would be filling in interimly. All of this happened, and the question now stands, is it enough? And so I kind of now want to ask you, do you think that's enough? Do you think that there were steps that could have been taken or handled more effectively that could have kept things from escalating this much? And even more than escalating this much, could it have been something that could have created an environment that people felt comfortable and safe and protected in, that they could come forward? So I want to go through a few things that were clearly missteps in this particular situation that might be important to learn when you move forward in your organization. So, first of all, as was clearly cited by the employees who complained against their male colleague, the HR department and the managers dismissed complaints and belittled people, were clearly not handling the investigation process in a way that showed them to be a neutral party or to be supportive of the investigation process. It was not following a policy if they had a policy. The leadership of the museum, whether in truth or just saying it, seemed to not have been kept in the loop. They seemed to be oblivious to what was happening right within their organization, which really causes a lot of harm when this kind of thing happens, because whether they're telling the truth or not, it makes you doubt whether or not they're actually involved in the organization's growth and success and strength. They clearly broke with the mission of the Human Rights Museum. So, what could have been done better? How could it have been noticed? What red flags could have been picked up? Well, so they brought in an external third party for review. Now, the fact that they've done this a few times before makes you wonder if the third party investigation is actually going to be a completely neutral source. Is there actually going to be a resolution? Once the external party brings forward the results of his investigation, will the board actually use those results appropriately? It's hard to say. They did establish a committee. Again, this is a step, and it's hard to say whether or not it's an effective step until many years out, probably. There were clearly patterns. Many people had reported this issue, whether it was the sexual harassment issue, the racial issue. These were all documented by several people who said they came forward and complained. And the investigations were not handled appropriately. And the fact that it never reached the board means that there were many breakdowns. So, the lesson to be learned now is that when you do handle issues right from the get-go, early on, you can avoid further missteps. You can avoid toxic environment being formed, the loss of trust, and by handling issues when they're small, you keep them from growing. And it helps maintain trust with your employees, with the community, with your consumers or customers, and your stakeholders. And the thing that I really think kind of sums this up really well is a quote from a national organization that does LGBT advocacy in Canada. Jennifer Boyce said, and I'll show this on the screen, "The trust has been lost, and there needs to be a lot more action and a lot more engagement if we're ever to hope for it to be repaired." So that really sums it up. If you can't effectively take care of a grievance early on, then you will lose the trust of your organization, of its members. And once you lose the trust, you have to refocus on regaining trust. And in doing that, you lose sight of your mission. And so at that point, your organization is no longer really there for what it says it's there for. So I want you to just think on that one. And I hope this is helpful. Thanks.